Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about the synthesis of materials and process to create an idea. So, first of all, if you're around people, you can do this or just think to yourself, what would be some ways that you could get across the idea of jealousy in a photograph? What would you put in it? Would there be people? Would there be objects? How would you shoot it? What your shutter speed and aperture would be? What would your lighting be? When you edit it, what kind of colors would you use? What would the people be wearing? What would their body language be? All of those things that you put in are going to work together to get an idea across. So the AP wants you to do this synthesis of materials and process to get across an idea. The way that I have always taught it to my students, and it seems to have worked, is that in photography, your materials can be anything that appears in your photo. What location you have chosen, because again, these are all active choices you make as a photographer. What objects, what people, what props, what are they holding, what's around them, what are they wearing, what are they doing, what's their body language, what's their emotion. All of those things are materials. And then the process is any way that you shoot or edit your photo. Your shutter speed, your aperture, your principles and elements of design, your visual organization. Is there sun flare? Is there what kind of lighting is there? When you edit it, is it dark? Is it light? The colors, you may Photoshop things in or out or do some kind of alterations or manipulations to make it look antique or glitching or, pixel stretch or whatever it is. All those things, those choices that you make, help get across whatever your idea is. So you definitely have to start with a strong idea, but that's your sustained investigation in general anyway. So we've talked about Olivia Parker in class before, but again, her husband is the one who was going through his Alzheimer's. So what she decided to shoot and how she decided to shoot it helped get across that idea that her husband was having a harder time remembering who she was. And so she could have done it outside, she could have done it someplace or sitting on a couch or whatever. She chose these to be in more of like a plain white background, a studio background. So, the only thing that we really concentrate as the viewer on is her. She decided to use long shutter speed and blur the motion and to move around so that we can see her and not see her. And all of these things are working together, even the kind of the black and white, so there's even less information, turns us into her husband, right? We, the viewer, are now kind of seeing her face, kind of not, trying to see what we can recognize, really struggling with it. And so all of these choices she made, including herself, the materials, and then how she shot it, the long shutter speed, the editing it black and white, helps get across that idea. Same thing with their dog. Who's forgetting the dog? And I believe we've talked about this in class. Is that, Alzheimer's patients are often asked to draw the face of a clock. So she made a bunch of active choices here. What did she photograph? A clock. What kind of clock? Actually, one that's kind of falling apart, right? Just like her husband's memory is falling apart. Then how does she shoot it? She shoots it using shallow depth of field. So some things are in focus and some things are hazy and out of focus. And then how does she choose to present it? Well, she makes it into a grid, but puts things out of order. So again, what she's shooting and how she's editing it and presenting it helps get across that idea that he's really struggling to remember the face of a clock. And this has to do that, like, he was batting away things that would creep into the side of his vision. And then, she says here he'd talk about colors and his language became more and more limited, but he was trying to kind of show her what was happening using kind of hand gestures and stuff. And so this gives more of that kind of feeling of things creeping in to the edge of his vision. So Hiroshi Sugimoto did a whole thing about like time, right? And he, in a lot of his, I mean, that's my interpretation. He does a lot of different work, but if you look at all of them, there's a certain sense of timelessness. So we think of photographs as like a little sliver of time, right? But what he would do is he'd go to these old, beautiful movie theaters. They're kind of, I think, starting to be abandoned, right? We don't make movie theaters like this anymore. And he would open his shutter and then play an entire movie and then close the shutter. And so, yes, it's a photograph, which we're used to it being just like a fraction of a second, but it's actually a 90-minute or so photograph, right? It captures 90 minutes of time. So it really plays with that idea of time. And then also, maybe it plays with the idea of time that we used to have these fancy movie theaters. We don't have that anymore. Things change over time. He chose to have it be, an empty audience. So that makes it more timeless. This glow, when you see these like all in a museum or a gallery, it's almost like you walk into the room and it kind of almost like hums, right? With these really bright areas. Because as the movie hits the screen, anywhere where it was light gets recorded on the sensor or the film, and that's why they end up being all white. And again, in a dark movie theater, like the light bounces off and then will slowly illuminate what's around it. So that also has to do with time. The fact that we can see everything here had to do with the fact that it was a full length of a movie. And he always puts like the screen directly in the middle, and that kind of makes it feel more balanced and timeless, which is something he did with seascapes. So, like seascapes, the ocean looked the same. The ocean is kind of timeless, right? It looked the same 65 million years ago when there were like dinosaurs on this planet as it does today, as it will 5 million years from now, as it did yesterday, right? The ocean looks very similar. And he would go all over and take pictures in different weather, different times, different oceans, different seas, and always put the horizon in the middle. Again, that makes it feel very balanced and really helps with that kind of timelessness feeling. So, like, when we look at this, we don't think about any specific time in human history or in history. These do seem timeless, and they're quite beautiful when you see them all together. So he made those choices. Where am I going to put the horizon? Where am I going to go? What's the weather going to be like? How can I get this kind of feeling of like timelessness? Now, Nan Golden did work in like the 60s and 70s and stuff. She did work in Boston and then in New York. And she came up during a time when there would have been very kind of like more kind of strict compositional rules about photography. And she decided to break them because she was doing stuff about her friends and her family and relationships and stuff of people. And she said, basically, is my interpretation, I don't want these to look art photos. I want these to feel real. And so she shot them kind of with a screenshot, not screenshot, sorry, snapshot kind of look to them, right? So we, the viewer, feel like we're right there. We're in the room. We're witnessing this. It doesn't look like some pretty piece of art that we're removed from, and they feel much more real, right? And so that was like a choice that she made. She gets in close to people. She's very kind of confrontational. This one's, I actually really like the composition of this one, but they do have that snapshot aesthetic. I would say for the AP board, the people grading your photos are not photographers. I think photographers would get this, like, oh, someone's breaking these rules on purpose. I don't know if the AP readers necessarily would, but I wanted to show you that what Nan Golden shot and how she shot it, where she is, how close she is, what she's taking pictures of, the way that she's taking pictures all get across this idea of intimacy, right? It feels very real and like we're there. So Karen Navarro, whose work we saw earlier this semester, she does themes of identity and self-representation. And so she, says, like a puzzle, my identities intersect, coming together to construct multiple sense of self. So although I do not appear in the pictures, I see them as self-reflective, and it's important to me to show the diversity within my models. So she takes these pictures, but then she cuts them up and puts them back together because all of us have identities that are, maybe always changing, have different parts that are brought together. Maybe we feel like certain things are missing. So all of these choices of what she shoots, who she takes pictures of, what they're wearing, what the background is, what she does to the images afterwards, get across that idea of the way our identities are put together. And then this artist is a fruit farmer in Japan and also breeds fruit, like different ones. And so I think it's really interesting that the way this photographer puts things together are really kind of beautiful and classic in the way that they're laid out, kind of all the different products of the breeding of the fruit. And if we look at historical references, we can see that for, the past 100, 200 years, whatever, people that were doing botanical kind of documentation for biology or whatever would, be looking at the different parts of the dandelion. We see the different stages of the dandelion, the different parts of whatever. And so the fact that this photographer does the same thing but photographically, I think is really beautiful because it's kind of referencing the history of botany and the kind of scientific aspects of it. And then the last one is Catherine Chalmers. Hopefully, you're not about to eat lunch when you see this. So she did a whole thing called Food Chain, and she's interested in like a lot of kind of scientific things. So, here we have the caterpillar eating that, and then more coming out, and then we have the praying mantis eating the caterpillar, and then the frog's about to eat the praying mantis. So it's a whole food chain. Now, she could have gone out and taken National Geographic type photos. She didn't. She chose to put these on a white background. So here, Chalmers sets her subjects against a clean white background. Quickly, the sterility of the scene becomes littered with blood and guts. So we have that kind of like juxtaposition of like this gross biological stuff going on and this clean background, this like scientific. And this definitely, when we look at it, it more references like, let's look at this scientifically. This is not just a nature photo. Um, and so all of the choices, the lighting, what she has, what she includes, the order that she puts them in, all of those things try and get an idea across. So just for the AP, you really need to think about, all right, what am I including? What is everybody wearing? Can we go back to this? What where am I going? What time of day am I going? What's the light here? What's the light? All of those things, those active choices, those materials, and then how you're choosing to shoot it is going to all work together to try and get your idea across. And that is what AP wants, but that's also just being a good artist. So you should be just doing this anyway to help better communicate, right? Because what's photography? It's a form of visual communication. We do it to communicate ideas to people. And this will make your communication that much stronger of your ideas. If you have any questions, just let me know. Thanks.